Welcome back to the Lou Perez Podcast. My name is Lou Perez, and I'm happy to report that right now you can order my book. That's right, I wrote a book. It's called That Joke Isn't Funny Anymore, on the death and rebirth of comedy. Follow the link in the description or head over to Amazon and search for Lou Perez, That Joke Isn't Funny Anymore. If you want other options on how you can buy my book, please sign up for my newsletter at thelouperez.com. You could also join my community at thelouperez.locals.com. And if you haven't already, please subscribe to the podcast. And if you could leave a 5-star review, that would be amazing. Whether you're a long-time listener or a first-time, 5-star reviews are lovely. If you're looking for other ways you can support me, you can do so by supporting my sponsors. If you're into CBD products, please check out palomaverdecbd.com. Use promo code LOU to get 25% off purchases over $75. And if you like cold brew, check out Black Organic Cold Brew at www.blvckbrew.com and use promo code LOU for free shipping. All right, let's go. I am very excited to introduce my next guest. This is kind of a trip down memory lane. He and I went to NYU together. We took a comedy class together that I remember. We worked on a project together and all that. We were classmates at NYU. He right now you can hear him on WABC on the other side of midnight. That's the name of the show. Please give it up in podcast land for Mr. Frank Morano. Frank.
Hey, Lou. Thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
Well, thank you. And we were talking a little bit earlier about I was supposed to have you on earlier, and then schedules just went a little crazy. I have 2 kids now. I think. How many do you have?
One, a 5-month-old.
5-month-old. Oh my God! My son, my youngest, he's turning 6 months in like a week.
Well, they're practically related then.
Right, exactly. I don't know what the their sign is on the the Chinese calendar and all that, but how are you liking fatherhood, being a new dad?
Oh, I love it. It's going really well. I mean, all the cliche stuff about how great it is that everyone always tells you, it's certainly, I found that to be true. It's very rewarding, and seeing him grow and hold his head up and be able to do sort of a half a turn and smile more and laugh more and be more expressive. It's very rewarding. Obviously, it can be very challenging too when you have unconventional hours, but luckily I have a very patient wife who's allowing me to postpone putting together his high chair, which would have been the activity I would have been doing now if I weren't recording this podcast. So we'll either do that right after this or tomorrow morning. Either way,
oh, man.
Fortunate to have a very patient wife.
She's a saint. My youngest is the youngest of 2, and it's weird going through it again. The development stages, because you kind of forget what it was like the first time you're going through. And I'm so happy that you're going through it right now. And there really is something that happens with the baby when the baby is able to smile, because a lot of people don't know, like, there's a period where there's hardly like any, facial expression outside of just crying. And that could be really tough, especially if you're a new parent, because you're like, I must be doing everything wrong because my baby isn't happy.
Yeah, you said it. So I think we're now entering a stage where he has much more full spectrum of emotion and facial expression. So we're fortunate for it. So whatever advice you have parenting wise, feel free to let me know off air.
Well, I've heard a lot of people, talk about it, and I turned 40 this year. And so I have a 2-year-old, and like I said, my youngest is going to be 6 months. And when I hear a lot of people like older fathers give advice, they're like, have babies younger, babies younger. And we're the same age. So, we're both kind of going through it. And, I'm like, what? I had these kids 10 years ago, I think I just would have been just physically more adaptable to it.
I think that's certainly that's probably true in my case as well. Although I feel pretty good physically, I can't imagine doing it 10 years ago financially. It's not like I make a
Right.
lot of money now, but at least I make a living wage. And by the time I get paid every other Friday, I feel like my entire paycheck is still out the door. So 10 years ago, when I was making, a good deal less, I think from what I remember, I can't imagine being able to afford the additional cost of things like baby formula and occasional sitter and things of that nature.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. Yeah, that you can sort of forget the side of being a responsible adult and where you were 10 years ago.
Mm.
And also like 10 years ago, I think let's see, 10 years ago I was 30, so I hadn't met my wife yet. I met my wife when she was when I was turned 31, or my soon to be wife. Not soon to be. What was it? 4.5 years of dating and all that.
Mm.
And when you're dating and you're testing the waters. Your goal is not to knock up every woman that you're dating. You want to find the right one. Sometimes it takes time, man.
If only I'd listened to you at the time.
There we go. So you and I, we went to NYU together, and what brought you to NYU? Why did you choose NYU out of all the places you could have gone?
It's a great question. Honestly, it's a love of New York. I can't imagine living or working in any other city, really. And there are other schools that I could have gone to if I didn't make NYU, and I probably would have. But NYU, I think, had the number one thing that I was looking for, which was being located within the 5 boroughs of New York City. But it also had sort of enough academic street cred that I felt it would count for something after I graduated. And the division of NYU that I went to, I went to Gallatin. Where did you go?
I was Gallatin.
You were Gallatin too.
I started arts and science, and then I transferred to Gallatin.
Right. So I did 3 years, but I did all 3 years at Gallatin, and I was very attracted to the fact that they let you do a lot of internships because I've always felt that you get a lot of real world experience, learn a lot, and develop a broad network of contacts through these internships. So I was glad that Gallatin offered that and sort of let you. I've always had sort of been all over the place in terms of my interests. So I sort of like that they let you played academic cafeteria, one from this column, one from that column, and a lot of other schools don't do that. So those are all some of the factors that led me to NYU.
Yeah, for those of you who might not know about Gallatin, it's the School of Individualized Study. So you basically create your own major or concentration. So there's a lot of freedom there. There's a lot of independence that's involved in that, which looking back, I probably could have done better with some more structure in what I was going to do. But ultimately, I was going to learning to do creative writing, and I ended up making a career out of it. At some point, I ended up making a career out of creative writing, and I'm from Queens originally. I think you're Staten Island, right?
Absolutely, yep.
Yeah.
Still here.
Yeah, so they're for me, like NYU was sort of the perfect place. It was it was the city. A place that I would, often, go to when I was in high school and try to get into bars. And there was just, at the time that we went, we were, let's say I'm class of 04. Around that time, there was still I don't know, excitement. There was a level of mayhem you could get into or stay away from, and street smarts, that you had. So yeah, for me, it really was the school to go to.
Yeah, no, I think all that and spades for me too. Everything that you just said and then some.
Yeah, and I look at I check in every now and then on our alma mater, and I'm wondering what the hell is going on over there. What was one of the last things that I saw they were doing? It was sort of like this, I guess, like I don't know if it was a school-wide festival in celebration of the birth of Karl Marx like 200 years ago or something like that. Yeah.
I missed that. I didn't see that, but it doesn't surprise me. There was a lot of that going on 20 years ago too. So that doesn't surprise me too much. I think NYU's always had a pretty anti-establishment, left of center orientation among the student body and the faculty. So that doesn't surprise me terribly much.
Yeah, but what's amazing though is that there's still this love of Marx and leftist politics in a school that's like, what's it, like $70,000 a year now?
That is amazing. That is amazing. Well, I would venture to guess that most of the people attending NYU aren't paying for that $70,000 themselves. Someone else is paying, whether it's a scholarship, whether it's their parents, whether it's a student loan of some sort. For the few that might be paying that freight themselves, which is impossible, I think, for an 18 or 19-year-old, I would guess those are not the same folks that are celebrating the 200th birthday of Karl Marx.
Yeah. I went down to NYU not too long ago, and it's really wild how I'm separated by all these years, and then going down there, and it feels like sort of in a way kind of going back in time. Like, oh, Washington Square Park, I used to spend so much time there, and then like going back. Do you is your office around there? Is your studio?
Not currently. Now we're in Midtown. We're in Midtown East, 49th and 3rd. Until about a year and a half ago, I was working downtown. So I would, I still pass NYU frequently as I'm going from Midtown to downtown, or Midtown down to Staten Island. But I haven't, I'm trying to think. I mean, it's been such a weird 2 years in terms of in-person events in Manhattan. I'm trying to think the last thing that I really went down there for and walked around. I don't recall. I think it was probably about 2.5 years ago. So I haven't spent a great deal of time there recently.
Yeah. Obviously you have your radio show, you're, covering all the stuff that's happening in New York and all that. I guess I, like most people, are still trying to figure out what the hell these last 2 years were. It turns out I actually, a year ago, I got out of New York and I moved, across the river to Jersey. I'm one of those guys. I spent, almost 40 years in, born and raised in that state, in the city. And I just got to the point where I lost so much. I felt like I, almost lost a loved one with where the city went.
Yeah, well, I think, look, I think you're speaking for a lot of people. I think there are some signs that that New York is coming back. You're seeing more employers gradually have their staff come into work at least 3, 4, 5 days a week. At my workplace, everybody is back 5 days a week. And so everybody's in and expected to be in. It's the exception to work from home, a super exception. And they like everybody to come in. So, but I think there are a lot of other workplaces where there's not the case. I think that's, that's something. I think the focus from policymakers and the media and the public on the crime issue, which is really directly tied to the tourism issue and a lot of other issues. I think that's hopefully going to lead to an improvement in some of what's happening in terms of crime. Mayor Adams seems to be pretty serious about cracking down on these on the streeted homeless and doing something about these homeless encampments. So hopefully, as some of those quality of life issues improve, then you'll see the kind of New York that folks were accustomed to at one time or another come back. But the thing is, New York has had so many different phases. If you go back to what New York was like 30 years ago instead of 20 years ago, there were 2,200 murders a year. That is far more than we have now. So I mean, it depends on, there's all this New York nostalgia that people have, but depending on what era you're romanticizing, New York's still not as bad as it was in the late 80s, early 90s, at least in terms of crime and the fear that seemed to grip New York in those days.
Yeah. No, that's a good way to put it. I made a video a few years ago. It was about a guy complaining about gentrification and like him wanting to get back to that old New York. And it turns out he moved to New York like 3 weeks ago from Vermont. So it's a lot of people who sort of long for those really awful days, who didn't have to live through those awful days,
Yeah. Well, the thing about those bad old days was that, sure, you were risking getting your car stereo robbed, having a squeegee men run up to your car and give an unwanted, car cleaning, and risking being mugged as you're walking to work. But at least it was affordable to live here. You didn't have to spend $4,000 or $5,000 a month for a studio apartment in Manhattan. In some ways, it seems like the direction we're headed is almost San Francisco-like, where it still costs a fortune to live here, but you still have to worry about tripping over homeless people on the way to work and getting mugged on your way out of work. So hopefully we can get to a happy medium where at least the increase in crime comes along with a decrease in cost of living, rather than have that sort of inverted scenario like San Francisco does.
Yeah, I forget who said it, but they recently like got out of the city, and they said, while they were there, they were basically paying for their own oppression. It's like just paying just an insane amount in taxes, in cost of living, and you walk outside and you're like, oh well, that the guy living outside of the building where people are paying $3,500 a month for a studio apartment seems to be doing all right. I mean, he's a neighbor without having to actually pay.
That's true, and one can only guess what he's paying in taxes on what he's collecting in donations and redemption of plastic bottles.
Yeah. Well, so before we moved, we were living in Brooklyn Heights, and my wife and I were just absolutely in love with the neighborhood. I think that's probably one of the reasons why I landed her, was because she saw that I had a 1-bedroom apartment in Brooklyn Heights. And I often think, had we like moved away before the pandemic, we would be, in our house in the suburbs, like looking back and just like longing for New York, like missing it really badly. But the fact that we lived through it, lived through the pandemic there, and lived through, sort of the changes in the city, more of a cultural thing, I think more than anything. It was sort of like, like I said before, it's like we kind of lost a loved one, and we were like, okay, this is really the time for us to be out of here.
Sure.
I really hope that the city comes back. My family's there. We still have a family business there, and and that sort of thing. It's just I'm sort of doing the math, and I was like, I say it takes 5 years. Well, I'm going to be like 45, and those 5 years are going to be a struggle for me to be in the city, to be dealing with all this stuff, and so I am where I am now. So.
You know what people have to do, whatever works. You can't knock it.
That's right. I absolutely. I don't know if you know this, but on your shelf, there is a license plate. For those of you who can't see it, it says ASSMAN on there.
That's true.
And I did not know that about you, Frank. I did not know about you in college.
Well, that's from, it has nothing to do with my ability to get girls. That was when I was studying to be a proctologist, actually. I am a Seinfeld fan, and a listener, I do talk about Seinfeld on the radio, and a listener sent me that novelty license plate from that episode where Kramer ends up with that vanity plate on his car. So it's got a place of honor on my bookshelf.
Nice. Oh, and I forgot to tell you, but the last episode I had on our old teacher Barry Goldsmith. I had him on.
That's great
on the show. Yeah.
Oh, that's wonderful. I haven't seen it yet. I'll have to check that out. I was with Barry on Friday, and for better or worse, he seems exactly as he was when we studied under him 17 years ago.
The exact same guy.
Yes.
Like he does not change at all. He kind of looked like it was at the end of the episode where I was like, oh man, he kind of looks like Fran Lebowitz a little bit. Like he looks like he could be Fran Lewitz's sort of guy version.
I could see that. I could certainly see that.
Yeah. But yeah, it was a nice trip down memory lane getting to talk to Barry. Yeah, and well, the last time that I think spoke to you, I think it was in an official capacity. You were co-hosting a show with Joe Piscopo, and I was a guest on it, promoting like a mini documentary like a few years ago.
No, I remember that. You were terrific. That was that was a great appearance, and it was good to see you again. And I'm glad to see you're, doing so well and still keeping so busy with all this stuff.
I appreciate that. Well, I remember being on the show with you in Piscopo, and it's just one of these things, man, where it's sort of like there are these figures that I grow up with, and they only exist in this little box of a TV. I don't even really watch. I don't really have the TV, and now everyone exists in the computer, and it just blows my mind when I'm able to actually, communicate with them. And then with the case of Joe Piscopo, like sit right next to him. That was just that was pretty unreal.
That was a lot of fun. I had a similar feeling working with him for 6.5 or 7 years. And you're right. I mean, he is somebody that you always picture as being mechanically reproduced, coming to you through a television screen or a movie screen or a radio or whatever the case may be. But it was a real treat to work with him for so long and see his whole shtick up close and personal.
Yeah, he's a really interesting guy because I mean he's a comedy legend, and he came up at a time where unfortunately it was weird for a funny man to be built, like to work out, to be like a body, and he appeared in like a number of like bodybuilding magazines, and it's like, damn, if he had just waited 20 years, that would have been freaking crazy. It's like it's so acceptable now for like to be a funny man and to be the type of guy who looks like you're athletic and all that. You don't have to be, sort of that prototypical, schlubby comedian or something like that.
Right. Yeah. Look at a guy like Carrot Top. He's from what I understand, in great shape, very muscular. But I think a little. I think there was probably more made by the public about Joe's becoming such a bodybuilder and the effect that it had on his career. I'm not sure. The fact that Joe didn't achieve a level of superstardom comparable to a guy like Eddie Murphy or Martin Short, I think has less to do with the fact that he became super muscular and more to do with some of the other decisions that he made over the years, because he had different priorities in life. If you read the or see the behind the scenes featurette on Back to the Future, he apparently turned down the role of Doc Brown in Back to the Future. Now, I've asked Joe about that. He says he doesn't remember that, but there are enough published sources saying that. And I asked Joe, he said, it was probably true. I turned down everything in those days. He's a father of 5, and he made the decision a long time ago that that was going to be his primary priority. And, you can't begrudge him for that.
Yeah. Yeah, I think there was a similar thing that happened with Rick Moranis. I believe his wife passed away, and he retired from acting to raise his kids.
Yeah, I mean, similar with Charles Grodin. I mean, Grodin came back after he raised his son, but yeah, he was able to step away for a number of years to raise his son. And look, you can't knock it if you can afford to do it. God bless you.
Yeah. So you're on a podcast right now, my podcast, but you do radio, right? Now,
right, which is also available in podcast form. If anyone ever wants to listen to it, they can search for The Other Side of Midnight on iTunes or Castbox or Spotify or whatever podcast platform people listen to stuff on these days.
Yeah, have you noticed like a big change with podcast versus radio? Is it a war? Is it a war?
No, I wouldn't say so at all. I mean, I think there's the lines between podcast and radio show have sort of become blurred in many respects, especially now that you're seeing more and more podcasts being podcast, or I was going to say broadcast live, really because you can get our show and all the shows on our station not only on the radio, but you could get them via live streaming audio at wabcradio.com or through the 77 WABC app. And then if you don't want to be up at 1, 2, 3 o'clock in the morning, you can also just wait and listen to the podcast and subscribe just like any other podcast. So I think in some ways, you're actually seeing radio shows behave more like podcasts that happen to be broadcast on the radio. Now, I think there's still a market for people, and I hear from them every day in terms of callers who are scanning through the channels looking for something interesting, and then they stumble upon and discover your show unsolicited. That's not something that generally happens with podcasts. Usually you go and search for a podcast for something that you're interested in, or a podcast is shared by somebody that whose tastes or opinions that you trust. And there's not usually that level of random discovering of something. Although sometimes I hear with Spotify and other podcast apps, it does recommend certain podcasts that you might enjoy based on your interest. So I guess maybe there is a little element of that.
Yeah, I mean, you're on from 1 to 5 in the morning, and I don't remember the last time I was willingly awake between 1 and 5. Like if I'm up between 1 and 5, it's either to tend to my kids, or I'm just worrying about my future, or have I've been having some really crazy, like vivid nightmares that have just been keeping me up. Right. Yeah. How do you do it, man? How do you do 1 to 5?
Well, look, at the end of the day, I'm not digging ditches or doing brain surgery. So the worst that can happen is I'm not as well rested as I should be, and maybe not as quick witted as I wish I were on the air. But I really enjoy it. I love the overnight radio audience. I love being at the radio station at a time when there are fewer people there that try to engage you in small talk or try to give you notes on what you're doing on the radio, and fewer meetings with management. I love all that. I love, being able to drive to work and get a parking spot right in front of the radio station. I feel like there's a fraternity with me and everybody else that's awake at that time, either because they're working or because they're coming home from work or driving to work or because they can't sleep. Those of us that are up in the middle of the night or the middle of the morning, it really is special. And I feel a kinship with them. I really like it. I wouldn't have it any other way. Now, that being said, the asterisk comes with, it is a little different now having a child, because these days I generally get home around 6:30. So I will look after our son for 2 hours or so that my wife can try and get a couple of hours of sleep. And then we have a babysitter that comes from 9 to 1. So I try and get up shortly after 1 so that I could stay with him again while my wife works from home. So that has added an extra element of challenge, because a lot of times I would use that time during the day to either sleep or to work on the next day's show. So now it does seem every day I'm sort of searching for extra minutes that I can work on the show. But you make it work. It's a lot of fun, and I think we're putting out a very good product, and it could be very rewarding. So I think I really enjoy it.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about the sort of that fan base who is who's up at those hours, because like what are like, if you were to describe sort of like the fans that are up then, how would you describe them?
I don't know. These days, there are so many people listening from all different walks of life that I don't know that I could cast a wide net in terms of ascribing a profile to them. You have your truckers, a lot of Uber drivers and taxi drivers. You have people that work in restaurants and are driving home late at night, people that are working jobs like security that listen while they're at work, people that are, that have bread delivery routes and things of that nature. But you have more and more people that are home listening and setting their alarms to listen so that they can listen live, either because they're retired or they don't want to miss the show. Now I've noticed we're getting more and more international listeners. Just this week, I got a nice email from somebody listening in Spain who listens at a much more civilized time, because I think they're
5
or 6 hours ahead. Yeah. And another woman commented on her. We have some West Coast listeners. It's a lot earlier for them. Some European listeners, it's a lot later for them. So I think people listen from all over the place, all walks of life.
I forget. There's this app or something called, I think, like Chartable with podcasts, and I guess to get me to join, they sent me like an email saying that I was listed, I think it might have been Cambodia. So I was like, I think I broke like the number, the top 200 English comedy, podcast in Cambodia. So
I'm not the least bit surprised by that. It's all those Pol Pot jokes you've been making over the years that I can see resonating well with the Cambodians. Big hello to everybody listening in Cambodia.
Yeah, and my Pol Pot jokes come from a good place because I respect the man. I respect what he was trying to do. I mean, the idea that you would allow, teachers or people with eyeglasses to just be walking around your country. No way. Out to the fields.
No doubt about it. No doubt about it.
Get out. Yeah. What a reference. What a Pol Pot reference. Do enough people know? Yeah, I don't think anybody really knows about it.
I guarantee you the Cambodian listeners are listening either in hysterics or in horror right now. So whatever.
Which I'll take it. I'll take the attention there for sure. With your show, do you have anything you're excited about coming up? Or are you going to be on? I guess technically
tonight.
Tomorrow morning.
Yeah, exactly. Well, right, tonight, tomorrow morning, however people characterize it. I have to look at my my notes to see what's upcoming. I get excited by trying to do something different each and every day. I try and find the kind of subjects on the radio that no one else is doing, or if they are the subjects that everyone else is doing, the Russia-Ukraine war comes to mind, then I try to find different angles and different perspectives that people don't have. Like I recently had on a gentleman named Tim Kirby, who's a Russian, who lives in Russia, is as pro-Putin as can be, but was born and raised in the United States, still an American citizen, lives in Russia, does a YouTube show out there, plays football for a Russian football team, and is the most pro-Putin person in the world. He sounds more American in terms of his accenting than you and I do. So that is that's a perspective that you don't usually hear. Not only a pro-Russian perspective, but a pro-Russian perspective from actual Russia and from an American who's living in Russia. So that always engenders an interesting response. So I always try to do the opposite of whatever everybody else is doing. So for instance, a lot of people love just focusing on the same 3 or 4 subjects that happen to be in the news. Coming up tomorrow morning, we're doing 20 minutes on whether or not America should shift to proportional representation. That's not something that you usually hear about in talk radio. I have a guest on tomorrow morning talking about the Shroud of Turin. Is it real? Is it a hoax? What is the next step in investigating the Shroud of Turin? That's the sort of thing that I really enjoy doing, that you don't always get to hear much of on the radio. So we're going to talk Disney as well, given everything that Disney's going through. I have a Disney YouTuber on, so I don't know that there are many other radio shows where you can talk about proportional representation, Disney, and the Shroud of Turin all within 40 minutes of one another. So that's the thing that I really get excited about, is trying to do things that no one else is doing.
No, that sounds great. I think one of the issues, and like you brought up, is when there's like 3 topics that everybody is talking about, there's also sort of this it feels like this energy where you have to have an opinion about these 3 topics, even if you don't know really anything about it. You must take a side. You must do that. Where I
Right.
feel like,
Right.
seeking out other things. Yeah.
Yeah, if you don't have an opinion about Will Smith slapping Vladimir Putin because they're both upset about inflation, then forget about it. You better find another career.
Yeah. Oh, that American in Russia, that sounds interesting. How'd you find him, or did he find you?
I don't remember how I found him. You go. I don't know if this is how it is when you talk to folks or when you do research on different subjects. But in my case, I end up going down this rabbit hole of all right, this person was interesting. Let me look up this person's Twitter profile, see what they're tweeting about, see what they're writing about, see who some of the other people that they follow is, and you kind of just get down a rabbit hole of this person's interesting, that leads to an interesting person, this leads to an interesting person. So I always just try to go. And now that I've developed sort of a reputation as an iconoclast and somebody that likes these offbeat subjects and offbeat topics, now they are coming to me a bit more.
Yeah, that's great. When I get pretty flattered when people reach out to me and say, "Hey, I'm an author," or I'm a professor. I'd love to come on your podcast. There's I'm always like, oh my God, they heard me. That's pretty cool. And then it's funny, like trying to do the vetting a little bit beforehand, because you have to be a little careful.
That's for sure.
You bring into your home and talk to. Yeah, it's wild. Well, I think the iconoclastic nature is something that that doesn't really go out of style. I don't think the willingness to being able to, risk a little bit, by either bringing people on or.
I agree. I mean, if you look at podcasts or streaming platforms or whatever other than conventional television and radio that seems to be doing well, it's people that don't fit a conventional cookie cutter narrative. People like Joe Rogan, Glenn Greenwald, Michael Tracy, a number of others. And meanwhile, if you look at, more establishment conventional media sources that try to branch out and get people to pay for something that they're getting for free and don't really like that much when it's free, CNN Plus comes most immediately to mind. Mm-hmm. You see, those don't really seem to be doing too well. So I think there's a lot of room for thinking outside the box. And that's one of the things that I think new media has given people the opportunity for, which might not have been there 30 or 40 years ago, or at least in very limited form. You did have public access television or public access cable television, which provided an outlet for unconventional views and personalities. You had, non-commercial radio outlets like WBAI here in New York. But by and large, it was very difficult, unless you were doing things the way everybody else was doing them, to find a place, to find a platform.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And I think it's a similar thing with comedy too. It's, if you go back 30 or 40 years, there was sort of, this was the track that you would have to be on if you wanted to make it in comedy. If you wanted, if you wanted to, do stand up and just do the clubs, okay, you could do that. But then it became do stand up, get that deal to do a sitcom, maybe do movies, and et cetera, et cetera. Where now,
right.
It's so open, as far as, being able to, take all these different, routes to, to get where, who knows, where it'll take you with,
precisely.
With Twitter. There was something interesting I saw happening today. There were quite a number of blue checks on Twitter who were complaining about losing followers today. And this, obviously this comes after the, Elon Musk purchase of Twitter. And so apparently a lot of blue checks were losing followers, but then people like Tucker Carlson were apparently gaining like an insane amount of followers. So I don't know what to, I don't know what to make of that. Although I did notice that, at least for me today, it was like the first day where I didn't lose like 20 followers. Yeah, I'm not big time, but what I would notice is, something of mine would hit and I'd get a bunch of followers. And then the next day it would just keep going, slowly trickling down. Whereas for the past like 2 days, it's sort of stayed steady. So,
I haven't noticed in my own case. I think my follower count remains fairly steady, but honestly, I don't pay close enough attention to. I mean, I have such a comparatively small amount of followers that I don't know that that it matters if I gain 20 or lose 20 in the grand scheme of things. But it's certainly going to be interesting, this whole Elon Musk era. A lot of people have very high hopes for him and for this new era of Twitter. And I think, eventually, once he's in operational control, he's going to do all sorts of things, make all sorts of decisions that upset everybody. So this is sort of his honeymoon phase. He's got nowhere to go but down.
Yeah. And for me, I'm always more. It's like I'm always more interested in the responses to policy or responses to changes than the actual policy or changes themselves. Like it is. I think it's more fun to just see, like, the human psychology at work and how people interpret what's going on. Like, I mean, to look online, to look on Twitter, and to have people equate free speech with white supremacy, and which is insane in so many levels, especially if anyone knows anything about the civil rights movement and how important free speech was for that, and how important free speech is for marginalized groups, for minorities, for throughout history. It seems like man, you guys are really just throwing this Hail Mary out there. Because a big change is coming that you don't want to see. So you need to, like, paint it any terrible way that you can.
Yeah, I would agree. I think you're exactly right. I mean, there obviously there has to be lines drawn. The question is, where do you draw the line? Do you draw the line at people advocating for sex between 70-year-olds and 7-year-olds? Do you advocate? Do you draw the line at Holocaust denial? Do you draw the line at vaccine denial? Do you draw the line at the COVID lab leak theory? Do you draw the line at saying Russian athletes shouldn't be banned from the Boston Marathon? Do you draw the line that the 2020 election wasn't really fair? I don't know where you draw the line. And the tricky thing is being the person that has to decide that. On my on my radio program, I set up a Facebook group intending to be just a forum for people who listen to the show to talk about the show, because some people really like the show and they want to do more to engage with it after the 4 hours that it's on. So I set up this Facebook group, and my intention was to just let people say whatever they wanted. And very quickly, it became clear that I could not do that, because you had a whole bunch of users deluging everybody with spam, promoting this product, that business, then a whole bunch of people deluging people with political spam, advocating for or against this candidate or that candidate or this cause or that cause, stuff that had nothing to do with topics we were covering on the radio show. Then, of course, you had a whole bunch of people that wanted to just throw vicious insults at others, and then people that wanted to bring up conversational topics that had nothing to do with the show. So all of a sudden, even in my tiny little Facebook group of 2,500 people, I'm in the same position that Twitter is. Now, I can't imagine having to make those decisions when you have 100 million people creating tens of thousands of tweets every minute. So I'm not trying to say that it's easy to draw the distinctions about where those lines should be drawn. But when you see things that are so egregious, like not allowing the editor of the New York Post to post an article, which has now been confirmed as authentic, related to something regarding Hunter Biden, for instance, that seems to me a pretty egregious abridging of people's, I don't want to say right, because you have no right to tweet, but it seems to me a pretty egregious example of corporate censorship, that in a platform like Twitter, which everyone intended to be a facilitator of speech, it really seems against a lot of the reasons people joined and the founding principles.
Yeah. And no, I definitely hear what you're saying, when it comes to that. And, I think that's probably, one of the reasons why I'm probably so against censors in one respect, because it's like, I don't trust anybody to censor.
Sure.
And when it comes to these, to these platforms, you hear people talking about, misinformation and disinformation and all this. And I'm just thinking like, but you're all adults. Like I'm an adult.
Right.
I am able to look at what you put in front of me and, figure out if it's bullshit or look for help, as far as, figuring out where there's such a, I don't know, it's like I don't know if it's like a coddling thing, but just this idea, like I don't trust anybody, to do that vetting for me. And I mean, fortunately, I have to say that my time on Twitter and online in general, like I've had to deal with some awful people here and there, but I had the ability to block them.
Yeah,
which was great.
right. Or
I
just
blocked them and they're gone.
I always love the mute option where people don't really know that you're not seeing their tweets. And I picture these cranks screaming out there into the Twitterverse, thinking that I'm on the receiving end of all these tweets and I'm not seeing any of them. I always like that mute option from a personal perspective. But you're right. Alan Dershowitz is very pro-vaccine, very pro-vaccine mandate. Robert F. Kennedy Jr. very anti-vaccine mandate and all that stuff. The two of them had a debate. And YouTube wouldn't even let them post the debate on YouTube because it said it carried vaccine misinformation. Now, think of how crazy that is, where you have the situation where it's essentially equal time from two, whatever you think about either of them, two very articulate advocates for their cause, debating, giving their perspective on events and giving their version of the facts and letting people draw their own conclusions. And YouTube said, no, we don't want that. Now, that's pretty frightening. Now, a couple of, a month or two ago, I had on Roger Stone, and he mentions the idea of voter fraud or something along those lines. I don't even know what it was. Now, I challenged him in the interview on the things that we were saying. Now, at the time, our show was being live streamed on YouTube. YouTube, as a result of that interview, they suspended our radio station's YouTube page. Now, think of how crazy that is. You can't even have a discussion about some issues. I mean, I was not sitting there saying everything Roger says is accurate, just the opposite if you listen to the interview. And yet YouTube decided that was against their guidelines. The point is, like, I understand the need for things like preventing, I don't know, if someone wants to live stream a murder or a suicide and you can't broadcast it on YouTube. I get it. I understand that. My problem is when we don't know where the restrictions are, and it seems incredibly subjective that I have an issue with.
Yeah. Wow. I didn't know that happened. Yeah. I don't think it does. I think it does a disservice to people who say, for example, disagree with Roger Stone, because what it ends up, looking like is as if there is a literal conspiracy to shut up, his side of the debate and to keep him, to keep him down. Yeah, I mean, that just doesn't, it's not a good look.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Agreed.
And I got to say, from being a little selfish, I happen to enjoy messing with people with whom I disagree.
Sure.
Like I'm actually calling for Twitter to bring back brother Louis Farrakhan.
I saw that. I saw that you had tweeted that. That was very funny. I may steal that from you on the radio tonight. That was very funny. Yeah, please. I have to see if I can flesh it out and get like another 3 or 4 minutes out of my own commentary. And otherwise, maybe when I have you on the radio, I'll have you make the case. But I thought that was very funny. I chuckled out loud.
Well, thank you, Frank, and I want to thank you for coming on. I know you got a show tonight, and this has been fun, man. And I look forward to talking to you some more. And so everybody knows, go to WABC, The Other Side of Midnight. Frank Morano, thank you so much, brother.
Thank you, Lou. It's great to be here. And again, if people want to catch up on the podcast, if they're ever not awake from 1 a.m. to 5 a.m., there's links to the podcast as well as all my social media at moranovision.com. That's MORANO vision.com. And I hope you'll come on with me soon. And I know it's a tough hour, especially for a father of two, but hopefully you can, drink some extra bottles of Jolt and join me.
No, it would be well worth it. It sounds like fun. It sounds like a party. Thank you so much for listening. And again, please order my book, That Joke Isn't Funny Anymore, on the death and rebirth of comedy. Just follow the link in the description or head over to Amazon and search for Lou Perez, That Joke Isn't Funny Anymore. And please subscribe to my podcast. Leave a 5-star review. Why not? Sign up for my newsletter at thelouperez.com. And if you want other ways to support my work, you can join thelouperez.locals.com. And of course, be sure to support my sponsors, palomaverdecbd.com. Use promo code LOU for 25% off purchases over $75, and Black Organic Cold Brew, BLVCKBREW.com. Use promo code LOU for free shipping. Thank you.